In the final episode of Season 1 of OpenToWork, we wanted to update you and recap on a few really important topics. We started with the OpenToWork banner and we're able to share some new stats directly from LinkedIn that demonstrate its impact. We then got into ATS scoring and how you need to write an effective CV, and rounded out with clarifying what the hidden job market really is and whether or not it's something you need to take notice of or not. This is an awesome episode. It's really useful for anyone regardless of the stage of your job search, and thank you so much for being part of Season 1 of OpenToWork. We hope you enjoy it. The job market has changed since the pandemic, and so have the rules.
What worked 3 years ago no longer works. There's so much more noise out there and so much contradictory advice.
We're here to help you cut past the noise and decode the new rules.
And to guide you to your next opportunity. We're going to give you our shared expertise and help you figure out how to make the most of this post-pandemic talent market.
So join us on this journey if you're open to work. Hello, James.
Hi, Matt.
We're back for episode 10 and the final episode of the Open to Work podcast season 1.
And what a journey season 1 has been.
Did you have any expectations on where we'd be now, where you'd be now, what this would look and feel like?
Yes and no. When we first started talking last year, the reason I even wanted to do this with you is I felt there was something there. And what I couldn't quite see was A, what it was, and B, whether it would land, whether it would resonate. What has been so gratifying is how much and how quickly folks have responded to what we're trying to put out there. And I believe that's because we're doing this like heart forward from a place of vulnerability. We want to share our insights. We've been super fortunate to have 2 sponsors for season 1 that have made this whole thing possible, that makes it free at the point of consumption, which I think has also helped with how much the audience has grown. I am surprised by how quickly it's grown, which is amazing.
And so I think one of the things that I am excited about is, and intimidated about, is that there is so far that I would love that this thing to go with this journey. There are so many people out there who talk, as you would, to quote you, erroneously. I think that's James's word of the podcast of series 1, erroneously, about so many topics about job search, which are, taking money out of the hands of vulnerable people who are looking for work and in an emotionally vulnerable states. And they're getting millions of interactions on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, etc., and on YouTube. And I think it just has galvanized me even more every single time I see one of those posts. Like, we're going to be the kind of voice of, hopefully, of reason and of insight to help people know how to run their job search, to understand what they're going through, and to have a clear platform on which to invest their time, effort, and potentially money in this journey of finding the job and being open to work. And it's great every time we see kind of someone from the audience, and from a listenership, reach out and say, hey, this has really helped me. It's been really important. I listen to it every single week. It means so much to us. And so thank you all so much. And, we hope that this is just the start of a long journey where we can build an amazing community and, maybe even be kind of the voice of candidates around the world to help fight for kind of a better candidate experience, for all of us, regardless of where you are in your job search and your seniority.
I think my biggest concern when we started this was what goes viral is either rage or fear. And we don't want to do either of those things.
We're not very rageful people.
Oh, yeah. And we're not about fear mongering. And I was really concerned that coming from a place of vulnerability and authority is an interesting sell on social media. And I wasn't sure if it would cut through. And of course, it's, we haven't gone mega viral in the way that some of the rage bait posts have. And that's never our goal. But I'm glad that we're seeing significant traction with how we're choosing to show up in this increasingly, to your point, this increasingly noisy space. There's a lot of opinions, a lot of voices, and
it's never sexy to say it depends. Which is also potentially one of your catchphrases of the series.
I told you I missed my calling as a lawyer.
So Aldous & James are one of the leading people and talent agencies Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people in talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all. But we're 10 weeks into a 10-week series, 10 episode series, and we've been both interviewing and job searching all this time. I mean, how are you reflecting back on the last 10 weeks of your job search as well?
As I've said, both on this podcast and in my column in Forbes and in my daily posts on LinkedIn, navigating the post-pandemic job market is an exercise in resilience. And whilst I know that to be true, and whilst I know that sometimes I need to listen to my own advice, it doesn't stop the fact that there are good days, but there are also bad days. It is tough, it is lonely, and it can be isolating and, even humiliating. And I am super fortunate that I have a loving partner, a really strong community here in San Francisco, a pretty strong community online, and this new partnership with you to go through this journey with you together. And even with all that, I still have bad days.
Yeah, I mean, I texted you yesterday and said, it's a bad day. I'm not having a good mental health day. And I'd seen something online for a job that I'd interviewed with or whatever it was, and it just set me off. I was having a really good day all day, about 3 p.m. and I texted you, and just to have obviously my wife's very supportive and my friends are very supportive, but having someone who understood what I was going through and could speak to really specifically, and then also to redirect my energy towards something that was really positive meant a lot to me. Like the podcast and the work that I'm doing at, independently in my job search that I have control over means a lot to me, because it helps me focus my time and energy on something that isn't my job search, which realistically, job searches don't take all day. But I'm in front of my computer a lot of the day, and it's because I'm wanting to invest in these other exciting projects. And if I had a recommendation and a reflection, is that I think everyone should have a side project that they're thinking or working on whilst they're looking for their job, almost, because it gives you a positive anchor to spend your day. And it could be they're your kids, or it could be trying to sell stuff on Etsy or whatever it is, but it's something that you have control over, that regardless of how many rejections you get, regardless of whether or not you're having a bad day, you can anchor to this the next day to focus on, that's going to give you positivity. I was talking to a creative person the other day, and I was like, do something that's going to be creative and spark those creative juices, because it's a long journey, and I don't know where I'd be mentally if I didn't have something like this to anchor myself to every single week, to focus my positive energy to, that I have control over.
100%. And again, this is advice I've published in all my various channels, but it's one of my foundational beliefs that when we give back, we get far more than we give. And opening up my calendar every Tuesday morning for free coaching, even when I don't feel resilient and strong, actually spending time with other folks that are navigating the job market and giving away my advice for free, it's super rewarding. It helps stave off some of the negative feelings that we all go through during an extended job search. And so if you have the ability to volunteer in your community, and whatever your community is, whether it's at your kid's school, in your place of worship, in your interests or hobby groups, or volunteering virtually like I do with an online community, I think folks would be surprised at how nourishing to the soul it can be, even if it's just a couple of hours a week.
I completely agree. James, tell us about our American sponsor.
Many of the legacy ATS products don't use AI in any meaningful way, which is what is so innovative about MojoHire.ai. It is an overlay that you can add to your existing ATS that helps you better discover candidates that are already there and reduces discovery time by up to 90%. Their comparative AI tool is a real game changer, and you can learn more at mojohire.ai.
Let's do like a bit of a recap of some of the key points. Maybe not kind of myths we wanted to dispel, but kind of key things we wanted to highlight through the kind of series, and just call out just in case people had missed them, or just because they're such valuable, ever changing and ever kind of discussed things, topics out there. And it would be a miss if we didn't start by the state of the OpenToWork banner, of which this podcast is so kind of unfortunately and fortunately named after. Where are we with this discourse online from your perspective, and how, if it is changing, how is it changing at all?
I think it's super interesting that we're still having the OpenToWork debate, which in my mind is really a non-debate. The journalist from CNBC who published the initial clickbait article with the ex-Google recruiter who said it makes you look desperate, did a follow-up piece, spoke with me and several other quote-unquote thought leaders in the space to give the opposing view to that original article.
I never saw that.
Well, it didn't get very much traction at all, which is in itself interesting. But the fact that the original journalist accepted that it was rage bait and it deserved an alternate point of view from folks that weren't trying to sell something. And that's the thing that I always try and emphasize. The person that was quoted in that original piece runs a small business in Utah. It's a small staffing firm. And therefore, they require friction in the talent market to make money. And so his goal, well, other than notoriety, which was obviously part of his goal was to help create an environment where his business could be a success. And that is 180-degree opposite to what you and I are trying to do. So that's also what I try and remind folks, is that what is the underlying financial interests of people that are saying stuff like this? So that's one interesting evolution of the debate. I obviously occupy a position of privilege in that I have a weekly column in Forbes, and the Forbes brand, the halo effect of that Forbes media brand gives me incredible access, for which I am very grateful. And it's super interesting how my own relationship with LinkedIn has evolved. I have been a LinkedIn user since the beginning, and I've been a LinkedIn customer for 15 to 20 years. And for most of that time, I've been invited into LinkedIn as a talent leader in a Fortune 500 brand. And, the quarterly briefings that they do. And I get access to a lot of insight and access to senior leadership at LinkedIn because of that hat that I wear. And what's been super interesting over the last 6 months, as I've also been wearing this different hat, is that the communications team at LinkedIn reach out to me in my capacity as a journalist rather than my capacity as a customer. And obviously that's a different relationship, and they're sharing different information. And I've been so gratified that specifically over the last month, LinkedIn have chosen up until this point not to wade in to the OpenToWork debate. And now LinkedIn are actively pushing back against that erroneous narrative. They're really trying, with journalists, with people like me, really trying to land the message that the OpenToWork functionality is working in the way that it was designed. It is helping people find jobs. And what's really interesting is that they have two narratives. There's the narrative that it's working for job seekers, but they also have a narrative that it's working for recruiters too. And without getting super technical and losing most of the audience, recruiters that use LinkedIn Recruiter, their primary channel for reaching folks is in-mails. And for most recruiters, the number of in-mails that they can send is limited unless you have the top tier package, the enterprise agreement, which gives you unlimited in-mails, which is violently expensive. Most recruiters don't have access to that. Most recruiters have 1 or 2 clicks down, which means the amount of in-mails they can send every month is limited. And whether it's 50 or 100, or it depends on the package that you have, once you reach that number of InMails, you can't send any more until you get responses from the ones you've already sent, or until it's the next calendar month. And so part of LinkedIn's revised messaging to counter this narrative about the open to work debate is that as a recruiter, if you send a message to somebody with the open to work banner, you're twice as likely to get a response, which obviously recruiters want a response. They want their InMail to have an effect. And so the message that LinkedIn are pushing is candidates use it because it's going to help you find a job. And recruiters reach out to people that are using it because they're more likely to respond to you. And I just think that's so interesting and so clever of LinkedIn to reposition it that way.
You decide if it's right for you, but the idea of it being unequivocally right or wrong for a single person, I think is definitely something I'm seeing less of. Neither of us are using the open to work banner, even though we're both open to work, because we have made an intellectual decision based on all the data in front of us that it's not right for one reason or another for us to use this because of our personal situation to have this banner up. And that's fine. And I support others in doing that as well. However, a narrative that is saying don't use it because you're not going to get a job is the data suggests that is not true. So use it. You don't use it for many other reasons, but if you're looking to get a job and that's your sole driver right now of using the LinkedIn platform, then using the Open to Work banner will increase your likelihood of having a conversation that's going to lead to a job. And I think that's a kind of a clean takeaway. The other main thing that we started talking about and the kind of the ongoing narratives on LinkedIn surround the kind of beat the bot narrative, which again is predominantly pushed by either people who are trying to sell you a AI CV writer or some sort of CV writing kind of product or coaching. And I think that there's been an interesting shift in this narrative recently, because I've written about this a reasonable amount, and I'm starting to notice that the idea of beating an AI specifically in the ATS in inverted commas, I've seen a slight reduction in that sort of narrative, but at the same time, I've seen a really big spike in ATS scoring narratives. So I'd love to talk about that because we didn't really get into that. We kind of passed through it because when we were talking about it at the time, it was so much focused around the AI that we haven't really talked about the ATS scoring concept. And like the Open to Work banner, like the AI kind of conversation, the ATS scoring does come from a kernel of truth in that there are ATSs, applicant tracking systems, which do have a candidate scoring or a CV scoring tool that are integrated with them. iCIMS comes to mind. Smart Recruiters is one that I've used before, as a number of others. But the reality is that these scores are either switched off in most US businesses because legal, especially enterprise companies where they're most prevalent, because they are conflicting with certain diversity and inclusion laws, or recruiters know that these CV reviewing and scoring systems are so bad and so inaccurate so much of the time that they're essentially ineffective. And I even had someone who worked for one of the largest ATS providers in the world reach out to me recently and said that they were running professional services for this business, and they knew that the scoring capability was poor and that they didn't recommend that their clients use it. I mean, yet people out there getting millions of views talking about how to optimize your CV for an ATS score, and it's just factually untrue, but is based in a really loose kernel of truth that has been extrapolated into basically fiction.
And the reality is that as AI gets better and as there are more products available and as legislation changes, that will become a reality. And when it does, it will be a good thing for all concerned. But right now, it is not a thing. It's not happening. I encourage folks to think about the entire process logically. Right now, people are being sold products that ostensibly will help them beat the ATS, whatever that means. But really what that means is if we're to accept that it's true that somehow the ATS was magically slicing up the applicant pool and only showing the recruiter a subset of candidates, which to your point is not happening right now. But even if that were true, the logical conclusion of that is that if this product helped your resume get into that magical pool where it's going to be seen by a recruiter, the recruiter is then going to look at your resume and you either have the experience or you don't. And no tool can change your career history. So the whole thing is predicated on this faulty logic. And I think folks want to believe that if someone just looks at my resume, they will see my value. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. They don't see you when they look at your resume. They see what you've done. And you've either done what the company needs or you haven't. And it's so situational and so specific that wasting time and energy trying to force yourself into a hole, and you don't even know the size or shape of the hole, right? There's such an asymmetry of information. You don't know what the company is looking for. The job description can often be very loosely tied to what the hiring manager actually wants. And so trying to reverse engineer your experience into a shape that you don't know, you actually don't know what the shape is. It's so flawed, and it's so unfortunate that folks are being sold this snake oil.
And ultimately, when it comes down to CV writing, it comes down to storytelling, and clearly and concisely laying out the business that you work for, the roles that you were doing, the context in which you arrived in that business, and the impact that you had in that business while you were there. And so we need to find a way to really clearly tell our story in our CV, and and have a clear narrative of where we're looking to go. Because that's ultimately what people are looking at. Have they done what we're looking for before? That means that they can probably do what we'd like them to do again.
As a candidate, you're in a weaker position because you don't know what the company wants. You don't know where things are in the process. The company has one job and there might be 100 applicants. There might be 1,000 applicants. There's huge asymmetry in the talent market. And the amplification of this asymmetry is, I think, what's given rise to some new myths, like the OpenToWork banner or the rise of bots and AI, but it's also helped re-energize old myths. And I think it's really interesting that this notion of a quote unquote hidden job market has started to gain traction again. And I actually wrote about this in Forbes because it's super fascinating to me. The hidden job market, that term, was first coined in the 1950s. And it was written about a summer jobs program for teenagers in Iowa, and why people didn't know about it. And obviously they didn't know about it because in the 1950s, everything people find out about stuff in newspapers, and newspapers were local. Then in the 1970s, a Harvard researcher called Mark Granovetter wrote a piece of research based on a study involving 282 men. Obviously, in the 70s, it was men, and how they found jobs. And his research showed, again, based on 282 men in the 1970s, that weak ties in their community was actually the strongest indicator of how they were able to find their next job. So it wasn't from immediate family members necessarily. It was from loose connections within their community that brought jobs to their attention. And so this was the evolution of that 1950s term of the hidden job market. And then in 1980, there was a book by a guy called Richard Bollas, and the book is called What Color is Your Parachute? And he really fused that 1950s term, the hidden job market, with Mark Granovetter's research, again, based on 282 men in the 1970s, and really then turbocharged this idea that there was a hidden job market and that you needed to find the hidden job market to find a job. All of this took place 50 years ago. And it's super interesting to me that in 2024, in the era of the attention economy, in the era of mass digitization, in the era of social media, that career coaches and hacks are still using this 50-year-old narrative that you need to find hidden jobs because jobs are hidden. It's not true. The hidden job market does not exist. It's not a thing. And it's wild how, in the absence of information, myths can gain can gain traction, or old myths can gain new traction. It's so wild to me.
I think especially in job markets that have like an element of scale to them, in that they are, like, let's say, sub-executive. In an executive level, it may be about who you know. I think it's fair to say. Like, it may be about having a really strong network with a really good group of recruiting leaders and CEOs, etc., who will know, and literally their job is to know an executive search leader's job is to know literally every single person who can do this job, like, in the market that they exist in. And so that maybe is at best an element of what a hidden job market could look like. But again, like that's not what 99% of the market are experiencing. So it's really similar in some ways to that kind of ATS AI. Like there's a kernel of truth in that, like, yes, in very, very limited, likely highly executive C-suite level roles, having a strong network is how these people can continue to move around and have ability across the C-suite in different businesses. But that does not translate to 99% of the rest of the market. And most jobs are posted online, as you've pointed out many, many times, because they legally have to be. What do you think people should be taking away from this first series? What do you think people should be focusing on in their efforts in a positive reflection from this series?
I think I would answer that in a slightly different way, in that you and I have been on our own journey whilst we've been making this podcast. And I think what's become really clear to both of us is we knew when we started this that there was a need for fact-based, authoritative insight into how the talent market is working. But I think what we've also had a hands-on lesson in is the true value of community. And I think what's exciting for both of us is how we see the potential evolution of this podcast and this community, and how we might be able to foster a community. I think we're still figuring how we're going to bring that to life.
I think that's like a light teaser of potentially where I doubt it will be in the light of day by the time this podcast goes out. I very much doubt it, given that we haven't even started developing yet. But I do think that a world where you have a group of people coming together to share their experiences, to go through this together, to have like a trusted resource they can go to and they can rely on, and advice and insight from a group of people that also share similar values and also want to share like their trusted insight and value, I think is a really exciting part of where this could go, because we're only also two people. We know a lot, but we're only two people. And I think for next series, spoiler alert, but we're probably going to bring in other people who also have really diverse ranges of experiences, who can also speak to their perception of the job market and how they should navigate it. So that you're not just hearing from our individual worlds, but from so many other people who are navigating this job market in their own way. Because if it depends, let's assume it does depend, then we need to get we need to hear from those other people where it may depend, and get their perspectives, because they might have a different narrative that might be worth sharing with people. And I think that's a good part and a really good platform for this podcast for and this kind of entire community that we're looking to build for the next kind of couple of years.
What have you learned?
Oh, geez, what have I learned? I've learned so much on like a personal level about what gives me energy and what kind of excites me, and I love what I learn from you as well. That every single time that we speak, and how to kind of be how to articulate myself. And I think I've learned that this is so necessary. Like I really am vindicating and almost at that point that like this, having this sort of content out there and supporting people with the this authoritative perspective, as you say, is just it's needed, and I hope that we can continue to do that. And my goal when we started this was just say let's just try and help a person. If by the end of season 1 no one listens to us except for our friend Jim or whatever, and they end up saying, hey, James, Matt, that was really helpful, thanks so much for your time, like I really appreciate it, then we've done our job. And I think based on the emails, the interaction we've got from the community, we've done more than just one person, which is really exciting. And we want to continue to do more and more of helping people. And so long as we can continue to do that, this will kind of have some sort of format and exist somewhere out in the world. And I've learned that this is needed by people, and that we should continue to provide the service to folks. So, and on that note, that's a wrap for episode 10 of season 1. And thank you again so much to our sponsors, Alderson James and Mojo Hire, for making this happen. Thank you for all of you for being here, and thank you for also sharing and supporting. This is, as you said, we're here to help people, and so every single time you share or you subscribe or you listen to a video, we know that that's you it's you listening and hopefully going on a journey with us. And we look forward to coming back to you next series with more advice and more content and more kind of value. And you can subscribe to our channels across YouTube, Spotify, podcast, and you can also email us at opentoworkpod@gmail.com. And in the meantime, James, where can we find you one last time?
Well, I just want to double down on what you said, and that we've received overwhelming support, for which we're super grateful. And if you want to continue to support us, the most valuable thing you can do is subscribe. And the next most valuable thing you can do is share this podcast with other folks that you think it might be helpful to. So subscribes and shares are incredibly valuable to us. So please, if you think we're worthy, do either or both of those things. And if you crave more, you can find me every day on LinkedIn and every Wednesday in Forbes.
Likewise, you can find me on LinkedIn at matthewparkeradvisory.com. And for one last reminder, please write into us at OpenToWork@gmail.com. We want to answer your questions. We want to say it depends to you too.
Yeah.
So please write in and we can respond with our it depends and hopefully add some context to the situation that you're going through in navigating this job search. And we look forward to seeing you soon. So thanks very much, everyone, for an amazing first series. Thank you, James, as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.